and I do not believe that any child should ever be in this space. I think we
Thank
should be working to get them out of
Mhm.
dysphoria. And what I see today is we're bringing them into dysphoria. And that disturbs me,
Mhm.
as this is not an easy road to take. And only an adult can take this road, because you understand you've got to live a little life before you take this. How can a 10-year-old know that they're a boy and a girl and they haven't even gone through puberty? It's
Exactly.
absurd. So I'm knocking heads with that sort of activism over there, because I believe they're sort of an ideological space. I do not, and I don't believe that they're being open to the world about it. As you see, I'm very open
Mhm.
about myself and my journey.
And welcome everyone to Prove to Me that You're Alive. Today, I have a real superstar, someone that's a leader of thought in our day, someone that I admire so much, someone that has, excuse my français, the balls to talk about the things that we as a society are so scared to speak about, the things that we turn our backs on and run away from. Today, I have the very much so amazing Buck Angel.
Wow, what an intro.
Thank you
Thank you, friend.
so much. Thank you. I always said that for some reason we get grouped into these different groups and movements, and we point fingers at one another, and we don't want to talk. And I think that we should communicate and we should speak. And so thank you so much for doing this. Buck Angel, in short, if you could tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, possibly where you're from.
Sure. Sure. So thanks so much. That was an awesome intro. And I appreciate you having me on the show, because I am a guy who believes in conversation and dialogue, especially today. I think more than ever in my whole life. So that being said, I am a transsexual man, which means I'm a biological female, and I was born 61 years ago. And I transitioned to live my life as a male 31 years ago. I am not a male. I am a transsexual man, which means that I never changed my sex. So what I do in the world today is I really try to push back on this new idea of what trans is. And I would say I'm not an activist. I'm an advocate for freedom of speech, for reality, for truth, for justice, all of those things. I'm also a big, huge supporter of freedom of speech. That is probably my biggest platform at this point in time. And so why I have really admire the fact that you reached out to me and are willing to have this conversation means a lot to me, because people won't have these conversations. And I'm not fearful. I am not fearful to say things I need to say, or fearful to talk about my journey from being a woman to living as a man. And, I think people are getting the wrong information out there. And I think it's important for me as an elder in the community to step up and start to set things straight, because we have some whack jobs. I'm not gonna lie about that. We have some wacky stuff going on in the trans space. So with that, that's kind of in a nutshell who I am.
But we got wacky stuff going on all sides. I just have to say, damn, you look good. Did you just say 61 years ago?
Yeah.
Jesus,
61. I was born 61 years ago, and I transitioned to live as a man 31 years ago. Yes.
God bless you. Oh my goodness, you look incredible.
Thank
Seriously,
you.
I'm not even like blowing anything up. You know what?
Right on.
So where are you from? What kind of family did you grow
Yeah.
up in?
So I am actually from Los Angeles. I live here now, and I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I had a super awesome childhood, my friend. Contrary to what a lot of people say about growing up trans, whatever, I grew up in the '60s and '70s, where it was totally peace and love and hippies, and my parents were like pretty, I would say, middle of the road, middle class. I've always grew up in a Republican household, but I would say I'm definitely, my political beliefs tend to be more classic liberal, which probably more moderate leaning. That being said, I had an awesome childhood, dude. I grew up like I was a tomboy. My parents let me dress like a dude. I was just like loving life, and I was a skater kid, and just typical Southern California kid. Problems didn't arise for me until, I think, probably like most people,
Mm.
puberty, dealing with growing up, all of those normal things. I cannot tell you that I had a bad childhood. And so my parents are awesome. You struggle when you grow up, all of those normal. I had I can't say anything other than I just had this
Yeah.
normal kind of Southern California childhood on some level.
That's awesome. Do you have siblings? You have like
Yes,
other
I do.
sis-
I have an older sister who went into the military at
oh,
18, and she served in the military in, like, I think the '80s, and there wasn't a lot of women at that time, and so that was, interesting. My family, we always push boundaries. I grew up with 2 sisters, so at the time, I was still a woman, and my dad really taught us as women to be very don't take crap from anybody,
mm,
don't, do
okay.
not, and just because you're a woman doesn't make you any less of. That's what I grew up with around my father, so we're all very tough people on some level, and we all created. So my older sister joined the military, and then from there she joined the LAPD, and so and my younger sister ended up just becoming a business person and owns her own business and is very successful.
So your dad pretty much had all three girls, huh?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. That's
So
right.
so if you don't mind, like maybe you can go into a little bit. When did you start feeling like, I don't know, I don't want to say something is off, because if you
Yeah.
feel natural, you feel natural. But
Yeah.
when did you start feeling like maybe, I don't even know how to word it. Maybe this
That's right.
body is not right, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah, it's a
when,
great question. I
yeah,
mean,
when
and I
did
know
that
it's not
come
easy
about?
because these trans activists make everything so difficult now. Like,
No, I'm not
just
even
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. I'm not even about the
yeah,
sensitivity. I'm more
yeah,
for, I will always advocate for how you naturally feel. Do you understand? And this is why I'm saying, like, if you feel this way, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm so tired of people judging our characters based, like, who we sleep with, or who, like, yo, it's none of
yeah,
your business, bro. Like, you know what I mean?
right
And
on.
so that's why I wanted to word it the right way, because I don't want to say that you felt wrong or you felt right. You understand? So
Yeah.
so when did you start feeling like you wanted to possibly transition, or maybe you were
Mhm,
looking at girls, or like, that's
mhm.
so interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate that. Thank you for being sensitive to that. So that being said, I mean, gosh, I can tell you since I was about 10 or 11, I started to look at girls, and I was a girl, and I started to deal, I guess, with having affection towards girls, not boys, and it was a difficult space because you're not supposed to do that as a girl or even
Mhm.
as a boy to have this attraction towards the same sex. So I struggled a little bit with that, but not really. It wasn't until I think I became about 16 or 17 when I really started having feelings for my best friend who was a girl, and
Wow.
I was like a I became a pretty well-known runner at the time, and
Mhm.
I was, being sought out for the Olympics, and I was like really, I was that typical butch girl lesbian at sports. Just picture that. That was totally me. But I didn't know I was a lesbian until I just struggled with my sexuality. I didn't struggle with my gender. I struggled with my sexuality. And so I had to go to therapy for that, and I just struggled, and no one really knew how to sort of deal with it. And finally, I just came out as a lesbian, I think around the age of 21 or 22. And I struggled with it. I did because I was in sports, and in
Mhm.
sports at that time in the late '70s, early '80s, people didn't really want you to be a lesbian, especially if you were in sports, because this whole stereotype, and then being with sponsors by like Adidas and Nike and all that, they would not tolerate that. You will get kicked off the team if you came.
Mhm.
So I dealt with a lot of homophobia in my early days. But as I grew and got a little older, and there wasn't transsexual people when I grew up. It wasn't something that anybody spoke about or talked about. And it wasn't until I found and inside of me, I guess I could say inside of me, I started to feel like I feel more like a man.
Mhm.
When I was a little kid, my mom would say that I wanted to be a boy, and I didn't want to be a girl. I wanted to be a boy. But my parents thought I would grow out of it. Like they just let me dress like a boy and be that. And eventually I did grow out of it, but not to grow back into it later in my
Mhm.
20s. And then I started to struggle a little bit with my gender and I think I'm more of a man than a woman. And there was nobody to help me because every time I would say that to a therapist, they would say, "Well, you're just gay." So I'd
Mhm.
be like, "Okay, maybe I'm just a butch lesbian gay person." But it just got worse over time, and I just couldn't handle living that. I lived about 10 to 15 years of my life as a gay woman. So it just crept into me where I
Mhm.
finally found a therapist who really helped me deal with it for about 2 years, and that was, I think, around the age of 28, I started to go to therapy for it, and then at the age of 30, 30 years old, I started to take hormones. I was the first person here in Los Angeles to do
Wow.
that. Yeah,
Wow.
30 years ago.
Thank you so, so much. This is one of the things that I really appreciate about you and admire, that you are so open. Um, but if you could, I don't want to skip the part, because I think it's so important. When you were 17 and 18,
Mhm.
how how did, like, what were you, did you feel outcast? Did you feel lonely? Like, did you go
Yeah,
home at night and think to yourself, what's going on with me? Because I think that
yeah.
this is important to get out to maybe some of the young people that
Thank
are
you.
going through this stuff. Like,
Thank you.
how was that process? I really don't want to skip through that process,
Great.
because I think it's so important.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I did struggle. Like I said, I didn't really know how to talk about it. I didn't really know what was going on with me. I mean, the word lesbian was such a bad word back in the day, and you didn't even want to think you were gay. And it was weird because I started to have sexual relations with my best friend at about 17 years old, and she would play games with me. So, we would mess around, and then next thing you know, she'd have guys come over to the house and she'd kiss them in front of me, and I was
Oh,
getting
wow.
all these crazy mixed messages, and it was just making me feel so bad about myself. And I think
Mhm.
that might have been, the first time I started thinking if I was a boy or I was a man, maybe the girls would like me better. So I started to think that, but then I just would push it down and try to put it up. I did struggle in a sense, and that's why running was such a great part of my life because I became a really great long distance runner. Because when you're a long distance runner, you just get to be by yourself and you get to think. And I excelled where people were just like,
Mhm.
oh my God, who's this person? Sports really was a huge part of my upbringing and a big part of my life. But the struggle was real because this was in the 70s, my friend. And, you
Mhm.
know, today we do have help for young people who are struggling. I'm not saying they don't, 100% they do. And I think specifically with sexuality, I think that's been really talked about a lot more than transitioning. It's a whole other, those are two completely separate paths, if that makes sense. So I did struggle. I did go to therapy. I did not graduate high school. I struggled in my academics very badly. I did not, people called me dumb and stupid and you're going to amount to nothing. And I was always being sort of pushed down on that in that manner. And, I eventually did start to drink alcohol and that became a problem for me. And I was a raging alcoholic and a drug addict. And it was horrible in my early parts of life dealing with the alcoholism because it just took me out. It took me out. I wandered the world for many years, not even having any
Wow.
direction.
So you really had no one basically to turn to. You only
Nope.
turned to sports. I commend you for everything that you went through, and actually staying true to yourself. It's so
Thank you.
hard in our world, to no
Yeah.
matter what, you staying true to yourself. But I can see how sports would, help you. So did your parents, I know you said you came out after 17, 18. Did
Yeah.
your parents know the depth of what you were going through, or your siblings, or
No, my parents struggled with it. They did because I was just a mess, and I was I became very reclusive, if that makes sense. I didn't really have any friends at school. In fact, I started fighting. I started getting into fights at school, so I got kicked out of one of my high schools and got sent to another one really far away. And I had to take the
Mhm.
bus every day. And I was a very shy person, very shy. I could not be this. The person you see today is literally a different person. I was very shy, didn't disconnect. So when I went to another school, that was so difficult for me because I couldn't make friends. I didn't know how. I didn't know how to communicate. And being a very masculine woman, you got teased a lot. So the thing that sort of brought me out of that was sports. And because I excelled and I was really doing so good, people just wanted to be my friend, but I still didn't know how to connect with people. So on some level, I was lonely as a 17, 18-year-old going through high school because I didn't know my own self. And it's a difficult road. High school is horrible. It is
Mhm.
horrible. There's cliques and there's if you don't fit into things and you don't know. And then on top of that, adding somebody who's struggling possibly with their gender or sexuality, that can cause and alcohol was my friend. Alcohol became my friend because it enabled me to sort of not have to deal with my feelings. And so my parents noticed the alcoholism and I started having to go to a therapist because my parents were like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, I wouldn't say anything. I would sit in my
Mhm.
room for hours by myself. Wouldn't talk to anybody. And the therapist was not even understanding of me either because I didn't go to a therapist, by the way. I went to a psychologist or a
Mhm.
psychiatrist, which is different. They
Yeah,
give you medication. So I
medication.
was put
Mhm.
on antidepressants. And then my parents were so pissed about that because I just became a zombie. And
Yeah.
my mom took me off it immediately, and they were not okay with that. So I feel bad for my parents. They really dealt with that kid, that one kid that's always sort of like just misguided, or the troubled kid, or I was that kid to my parents, and my poor parents, they struggled with me for a long time.
Yeah, but those are the geniuses and the superstars later on in life,
Yeah,
man. You know,
totally.
like you really have to go through it to become someone, man.
I
So
believe that.
so what happened? I'm so curious. What happened to that best friend and yeah,
So
the
I got
girl.
sent to another school. So me
Yeah,
and her were best friends, right? But we were both
yeah.
runners. And
Mhm.
she had me so manipulated, my friend. She would tell me, now I'm going to come in first and you're going to come in
Oh
second. And I would
man.
do it. And my dad would get so
Wow.
mad because I really wanted her to be my girlfriend. So
Wow.
I would just be like, yeah, sure. I would let her win every race. And my dad. So when I got transferred to another school and I had to compete against her, and then I just blew her out of the water, she would not ever talk to me again. And I just lost I just lost. We just never were friends after that, and I just lost everything. I never saw her again after that.
Would you say it was much harder in your days for this whole process than opposed to the kids now? Because you did mention that now kids have all this help, but
Yeah,
is it that much different? Do you think it
yeah.
was much tougher?
Well, I don't wanna say that my journey is tougher than anybody else's journey, because all of our journeys are different and how we get to our space. So that being said, I think it's just different. So I didn't have resources, right? And then as I got older, I started to help to build resources. But I think back in the day, there was nothing for me. Also, there wasn't an internet. I didn't grow up with the internet, which is
Mhm.
a whole other level of conversation. But so kids can start to create communities online, and that's a good and bad thing. But that
Yeah.
being said, they can also find themselves, and they can see other people. If you don't see yourself represented, I don't care what it is, right?
Wow.
Whatever group or community, when you don't see yourself represented, you feel lonely and you feel weird and you feel like different. And when what I am is not weird and different, it did exist. We just weren't allowed to talk about it. So that being said, their struggle is just as real as my struggle. It's just a different kind of struggle. I think today they have the opportunity to have conversation and talk about it and be told that it's not bad to be gay, or it's not
Mhm.
bad to be trans.
And they're lucky enough to have people like you know, to
Well,
be.
that's a whole other. Today I'm sort of the outlier of the
No, but
trans.
listen, it's trust me, man. It's you're awesome. I really appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you.
Again, I have to say it again and again because you're so open and you're so for real about it. And that's exactly what we need. So how did you step into your adulthood in your 20s? Were you still struggling with alcohol, and did you finally start meeting other people that were relating to you and maybe that you
Yeah.
could relate to?
So in my 20s, I basically just started to, my parents said, you're out of here at 18, get out. So I ended up going, moving out. I actually found a girlfriend. I started becoming really gay, a gay
Mhm.
woman, pretty much in my 20s, and I just started celebrating my gayness. That being said, I also celebrated my alcoholism and my drug addiction. So I was a mess from probably about the age of 20 to 28. There was so much going on there, my friend. I was actually walking on Hollywood Boulevard and got, quote unquote, discovered by a
Mhm.
modeling agency. And I ended up becoming a female model. And this was in the early 80s. And
Wow.
I was one of the very first androgynous models, and
Mhm.
they sent me to Europe. And I just was struggling with alcohol. I actually really could have been like a huge female fashion model, but my alcoholism and my drug addiction just wouldn't let me do that, on top of my gender dysphoria. So they would put me in dresses and
Wow.
very andro, and I would just freak, and I'd be like, give me coke, and then they'd lie coke out, give me drinks, and it was escalating. While my modeling was going up, my drug addiction was going up. And I was in London at the time, and they were really pushing my modeling stuff. And I just was so hated it. I hated it. It's like putting you in a dress. That's kind of how I felt. I felt
Mhm.
like, oh, what am I doing here? This isn't me. And it just escalated into, they sent me to a modeling agency in Paris, and I was going to be the first woman in a male modeling agency. And this was like
Wow.
85 or 6, I think. And I missed, I literally missed the train to Paris because I was so wasted. That was it. They just cut me off, and I ended up becoming homeless because I came back to
Wow.
LA, and my parents had cut ties with me at that time, which thank God. It was the best thing they ever did. They had to. I was just a mess. And it was called tough love on some level. And I ended up really just going and we call couch surfing on some level, and I just didn't have any direction for about 2 years, and then finally people got sick of me, and that's when I actually ended up being homeless and addicted to crack and just prostituting on the street, and I went home with somebody one night when you're not supposed to do that. There's rules to prostitution, and he almost really tried to kill me, and that
Wow.
was a wake-up call for me, and that was really where I got sober, and sobriety is a big part of my story and where I really learned how to sort of see myself for once without being shadowed by alcohol, and that woke me up, and I said, "I need to become a man. I don't know how to do it," and
Wow.
so that particular part of my life between the ages of 20 to 28 are so all over the place, and,
Yeah.
I can barely remember certain things
Right.
because I was just messy beyond. I mean, it's actually a miracle I sit here with you today. It
Yeah.
truly is.
Looking back now, what do you think kept you going through that time?
God, that's such a great question. I don't know because I wanted to die. I actually wanted to die. And it wasn't necessarily because of my gender dysphoria. It was just alcoholism, drug addiction. I didn't see out
Everything.
everything. I didn't see an out. I didn't have a career. I didn't have a focus. I was becoming like 28 years old. I was, just this old load of always being called stupid and dumb. And until I finally got sober and realize that I have to be responsible for myself. I don't know what saved me, other than the fact that I went with that man who I
Mm,
felt was gonna kill me, and
wow.
I said to myself, I'll never forget, it's a horrifying story, it still brings chills to my body
Could you
because I
could you
escaped.
could you relate? Could you tell that story, please? If
Oh,
you
it's
could?
horrifying. Yes, I would love to tell you it. It just still brings chills to my body. So here I am on the street doing my little prostitution thing, getting my
Mm,
money for crack, 20 bucks for a rock, blah, blah, blah. And this dude pulls, and mostly they were older men because I dressed up like a boy. I dressed up like a boy. It's so
mm,
creepy. That's how dudes would pick me up. So, and I
uh,
wouldn't really speak much and I would make my
mhm,
voice a little, they didn't know I was a girl. They thought I was actually a young boy. And I would just do the deed in the car. And then one time a young, really handsome man came up and he had a French accent and he was like, "Hey, dude, I got some coke. Want to go back to the house and party?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, let's do it." I went back to his, and I'll never forget. I go walking, he puts me in front of him, and he's
mhm.
behind me, and I'm opening the door, and he touches my back, and I can feel him sort of pushing me through. And this chills in my, the hair on the back of your
Yeah.
neck, you just know. And he goes, "I know you're a girl and I'm gonna F you." And I'm like, "What?" And
Wow.
then I just was like, "What, dude? No, let's just party, dude." I tried to back out of it. He's like,
Yeah.
gets me in there. I just do the deed with him. And I just remember after that, he had crazy look in his eyes. And I thought he was gonna chop me up in little pieces. And
Oh
that,
my.
and it was something about that was, I think, the defining moment where I said, "I don't wanna die. I don't wanna die." And I got out of it. I said, "Hey, dude, let's smart some more coke and let's take me back to the donut shop where you picked me up." He did. He took me back, and to this day, I believe that was a sort of saving that God just saw me and God was like, "Nope,
Divine intervention, right?
that's right. That's right."
So would you say it was rock bottom for you? That was it? Yeah.
Dude, more than rock bottom, like literally a black hole. I was like, okay, I can't go any farther than this. It literally was hitting bottom, is what they say in the program for sure.
Yeah, I'm in recovery too, man. So like
Excellent,
I
excellent.
I, I get you. So how old were you? Like 28 you said at this
28.
time? Yeah.
Yep, 28. And
Wow.
then 2 years of sobriety really woke me up because, in those 2 years, I went to a therapist, and that's where we really started talking about myself, and I said, "I feel like a man," and she would say, "Well, what does that mean, you feel like a man?" What a great
What
question.
does that mean exactly?
It's
Like
a brilliant
mm,
question because I couldn't answer it. This is why
mhm,
it's so different today that I find it to be really horrible what they're doing to these young people. You have to answer that question. What
mhm,
does it mean to be a man? And I would always tell her, I don't really know. And she's like, okay, let's just keep discussing. Why do you feel like for 2 years we discussed what that meant to me and why I felt like I needed to sort of be this man and why I couldn't be a masculine woman. And we did 2 years of intent through my sobriety and through all of that. So we decided to take the next level and what we used to call a sex change. So it was sobriety. There is no doubt about sobriety was the game changing factor for why I sit here today.
So did you ever figure out what it means for you to feel like
Nope.
a man? Like,
Nope. To this day, dude, I'm not a man. I'm still a woman. I didn't change my sex. I changed my appearance.
right,
Now, what
right.
I do know is now I've lived both lives. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
I've lived as a woman for 30 years and I've lived as a man for 30
mhm.
years. So I have a different perspective on life that not many people have. And I find it to be a gift. And I will never lie to people. I don't know what it means to be a man. I have no idea. What I know is this: I know I'm comfortable looking like a man and I'm comfortable people seeing me like a man. And I don't even think men can answer that question on
No,
some
we
level.
can't, man. But why do you think, you probably thought about this? Why do you think it was important for you to look like
Mhm.
a man, as you say? Like,
Yeah.
why do you think that's important?
Well, it relieved this thing called dysphoria, and that this is I have a mental disorder. It's a real thing. My brain doesn't connect with my actual physical
Mm,
space and the way people see me. That's gender dysphoria, and so I was diagnosed with that gender dysphoria. And so what it does is just an incongruence with the way you are on the inside and the way you are on the outside. So what happens for me is when people see me as a woman, it just takes me in a
mm,
tailspin when they say, "Hey, ma'am," or "she," or all those things. That used to bring me into a tailspin, but
wow.
now no one ever says that to me. So what that did is it sort of leveled out my brain on some level, which is what transition is supposed to do. Transsexual people want to look like a man or a woman. We know we're not, but and
Mhm.
on some level we're very honest about it. And that what that did is it lowered my dysphoria so that I could become a successful human. That's what we want for
Wow.
anybody in any
Mhm.
space.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. I wasn't like, I was never aware. Well, I know about like gender dysphoria and everything, but it's so interesting, like coming from you, how, so when nowadays you just, you feel better, right? Like,
Oh my god, dude. Like,
yeah.
it's night and day. It's, very important that people understand adults can make these choices, and
Hmm.
I am a success, and that's why I put myself out into the world today because I want there are some negativity coming around this now, and, people need to see as somebody who's lived 30 years this way and how, I'm married, I have a child, I have a beautiful life, I walk the world this
Congratulations.
thank you, friend, and,
Yeah,
that's all. I'm successful, I participate in the world, I do
right,
not push you away from me, I want to sit at the table with you. This is the representation I want to see, so that people like you and I can literally sit at the table together and never have any issues. We can just go on with our lives
I love
and be friends.
I love that. And you're so down to earth, like for even agreeing to do this. Like, you really, you didn't have to, but you did. And that just, I don't
Well, it
know.
says a lot about you. I'm going to say this. It says a lot about you. You're the one who reached out to me, and you're the one who's willing to have the conversation. And it's why I will always have the conversation with anybody. I don't care who or what
Thank,
you are,
thank
because you are also powerful, friend. Because now you're building bridges, and I'm a bridge builder.
you.
That's what I am.
Thank you so much. And that's what I always say, that we need to stop, like as I said before, pointing fingers or turning our backs. We really need to start communicating, because it's so easy to say, oh, he's transgender, or he's gay, or
Yeah,
he's straight, or he's whatever.
yeah,
But there's a reason why these things exist in our society, and they're not gonna go away, and we need to deal with it, man.
right.
Like stop being, ignorant little, I don't want to say children, because children are cool, but you know immature people, man. We need
Yeah,
to really start figuring out what we can agree on, as opposed to all these things that we disagree upon,
that's
because
right.
we all have a common enemy, man. There's a man up top, like,
You
so
got it.
yeah, we got to come together. So would you say that going into your 30s, life got easier for you?
The transition just changed everything. Now, remember, I did this before anybody else back in the day, and I was pretty much my doctor at the time. He had never worked with a person like me. He never worked with a woman becoming a man.
Mhm.
He had a 30 something, 40-year business of making men into women. So,
Oh, wow.
so he had never, I was his first woman who wanted to be a man. So he literally called me his guinea pig. He's like, told me everything, took out papers. He goes, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. You're literally going to be my guinea pig. Are you cool with that? This is going to happen from testosterone. You might have a shorter life. You might da 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 da. And I just
Wow.
knew it was what I needed to do. But he laid it on the table for me. And that was everything for me because I'll never forget him. He gave me a tiny little shot of testosterone. It must have been like a drop, dude. And then he said, "You're on your way now." And I just felt like $1,000,000, and it wasn't the
Really?
testosterone, it was all psychological, and I just
Wow.
something about that. I struggled with friends. I lost almost all my friends because they were gay women at the time, and
Sorry
they
to hear that.
did
Yeah.
not it's okay, at the time, it hurt my feelings, but I understand now,
It's
and
their loss.
well, yeah, and I just think that they were struggling with their own demons, and they
Mhm.
they saw me doing something that they called me a traitor. You're gonna become a man, and like what? That's just weird behavior. But again, when you do something before anybody else, it's not always the best to be a pioneer. Let me
You're a
tell you.
pioneer, man. You're a real pioneer. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So
So
that's crazy. I like wow. So did you have like what was the mental part about that? Like you weren't scared at all? Like
oh, yeah, I didn't know. So, remember, there was no internet when I did
exactly.
this, so I can't go Google transition, trans
Yeah.
man, what do you look like? None of it, because I was the first dude to do it here, so I'm like, "What? I don't know." So, I used to have this mantra, which is
Mhm.
horrifying, I'm gonna tell you this, but it was the thing that sort of kept me going. "If it doesn't work out, I'll kill myself." I used to say
Wow.
it all the time. "If this is my last chance. If this doesn't work out, I'm out of here."
You think you
And
were serious about that? I'm sorry for
yeah,
interrupting.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think I
You
was because I was just still on some level struggling, but not as much because of sobriety really helped me, but I still didn't like people seeing me as a woman. That was really setting me off a lot. And so that was just sort of like the safety net I had. I'm not I'm probably saying I would have, but looking back, I think that I might not have. I just don't know. I think it was something that I plugged in that just made me feel safer, that I could continue to shoot testosterone in my body and not know what. But after a month, you could already see changes. And after a month, even my brain started to feel much calmer and less
uh,
angry. I used to be very angry as a woman. And I'm so, they always say that about dudes. They're so angry and testosterone steroids make you nuts. I'm like, well, actually, it's the other way around. For me, I'm much chiller as a dude and much more secure as a man.
so what I think this is extremely important, and I don't want to skip through it. What was that first month like? We're talking
Yeah.
mental, physical, and
Yeah.
maybe even in some sense spiritual. Like
Yeah.
I'm really curious, what did you feel physically? Like, can you describe it in any kind of way? Like, were you antsy? Were you anxious? Were you more energy or more tired or more like what's going on to your body as this is going
Great
on?
question. I definitely got more energy. I definitely had more focus. I definitely felt happier. I definitely was scared. I definitely could not see past each day, right? Remember in AA, they teach you one day at a time. So I always stayed kind of in that space and
Mhm.
just sort of hopefully got through to the next day. Again, I think I think the happiness overrode the fear, but the fear always crept in. What am I going to look like? Right? How am I going to, I started losing my hair and,
Mhm.
and I started like, it's just weird. My body morphed. I can't explain it other than like literally my face started to change. It was weird. Like my nose got bigger, my jaw. That was
Wow.
just in 1 month. You could see weird changes. And I was with a girlfriend at the time, and she was not happy with it at all. She was like, "You are looking like a gym queen, and you're looking like a dude." And she's a lesbian, so we ended up sort of breaking up because I said, "I'm doing this. I can't do this I can't not do this for
I'm not
you.
going back, right? Like,
Not going back no matter what." It was sad, we broke up and not in a good way, but that's part of the journey. And we always tell people when you're going to take a life journey, you need to do it on your own. Unless you've been married for 30 years, different, but don't get a girlfriend or a husband or a wife. Just take time for yourself. It's the same how I feel with sobriety. You got to really focus on you. And that's with transition. You got to focus on you and make sure nobody's derailing you.
so was it you were taking shots? Their hormonal shots? Were
Yes.
were there were there any other medications on top of that? Like
Nope.
just shots, right? So what do you go? You go once a month? Like how does that work?
So great question. So here I am at a doctor who is
Mhm.
nothing. So he's using me as an experiment. He started
Right.
with I don't even know, it's a drop of testosterone,
Mhm.
and then I would go back every 2 weeks. Okay, and every 2 weeks he would up the dose, until finally in
Mm.
his doctor mind, he said, "I'm gonna keep you at 1 cc of testosterone, and I feel like this is the perfect space for you." And so he said, "I don't want you coming back here. It's like having diabetes. You're gonna have to learn how to insert this yourself,
Oh,
and you're gonna
wow.
have to take care of yourself." He is such a beautiful doctor. He since passed, but he was amazing. And he was like an old grandpa doctor, and he was just so loving. And he said, "So I'm gonna teach you how to inject yourself. Let me tell you, dude, that's
Mhm.
probably one of the hardest things ever to shove a needle in yourself." And
Yeah, where do you
oof,
do it? You do it in the butt? Like,
yep,
what?
in the
Yeah?
butt. Yep,
Mhm,
totally. And it's basically steroids, dude. That's what it
mhm.
is. And so I'm shooting steroids in my butt, and he's teaching me. I would spend hours in the bathroom for one shot
Practicing?
because I would try to jab myself and I would
Mhm,
get close and stop, until eventually I had a partner who started helping me do it. And eventually I learned how to do it myself. But he just sent me on. He's like, "Fly, birdie, fly. If you need anything, you come back." And that sort of was the beginning of learning how to inject the testosterone, and I still do today for the rest
mhm.
of my life.
What are some of the side effects? Because we hear like possible strain on the kidneys,
Yeah.
on the liver. Like, so
Yep.
what did you experience any of this throughout the years?
No, I'm extremely healthy. Number 1, I got
Thank God.
sober, right? I got sober. So we know what alcohol does to the liver,
Mhm,
right? So I already was clean 2 years before I started doing it. And with that, I started working out, I started eating right, I started really making myself become very healthy around this because the doctor said, you can't be heavy set, you can't, these are things that'll strain your heart. The testosterone strains your heart a lot and you can have a heart attack. So he goes,
right.
"I suggest you work out. I suggest you start eating right." I said, he really helped me make a structure. Luckily, I grew up in the sports world, so I wanted to be this buff dude, right? That's
You had
sort of
you
my
you had you had the discipline though.
I did have the discipline, thank God. And that so through being sober and testosterone, and then I started taking supplements for my liver. So I have not had any issues with my liver. I did have one life-changing, almost dying issue,
Oh my
and
God.
it's called atrophy, and it's called vaginal atrophy because I
Mhm,
still downstairs don't
mhm,
have a penis. And
mhm,
so because of that and of the testosterone, it really wreaked havoc on my female reproductive system. And again, being the first person doing this, I would go to doctors and like, "I have these cramps," and they wouldn't even know what to do. And eventually I got something called atrophy, and I got septic from it, and I almost died,
oh
and had
my
to be rushed to
God.
the hospital and have an emergency hysterectomy and blah blah blah. But that being said, that's the only bad thing that has happened to me since 31 years on testosterone.
Mhm. So basically, if you were to tell anyone that's taking that path as an adult, is the advice you would give them is
Mm,
work out, stay in shape, right? Eat right.
that's right.
And so within the first year, you didn't have any like crazy side effects or anything like
No,
that.
no. None.
How
I could say no craziness, but I would say my brain on some level changed. And I do think that testosterone affected the way I think. I became more confident in myself and I became more sort of the desire to be alive and to walk
wow.
this world and to be something. And it really gave me a different way of being. I'll be honest with you, it's not easy to be a butch woman in this world. It's like it's not
Mhm,
easy to be a effeminate man. There's
mhm,
these stereotypes people put on you, and I struggled a lot being a butch woman. Not that um, is a bad thing. I think butch women are extremely important, but
exactly.
that for myself, it was something that always just was off for me. And as I became a man and started presenting as a man, that energy from the world changed, and
Wow.
it was very important that people understand that that is part of the mental problem of transsexualism is it's all mental. That's why they call it a mental disorder. And when people say that it's not a mental disorder, I take offense to that because I've accepted my mental disorder and I fixed it on some level. And it's
Mhm,
important that people understand. Without me understanding my mental disorder, I wouldn't be this person, if that makes sense. It's sort of like when you get diagnosed with
mhm,
cancer or diabetes or something, you're finally like, "Oh, that's what's wrong with me."
right.
That's why diagnoses are very important.
Mhm. You touched on something really important, the brain. Do you think the brain changes in a way, like
Yeah.
physically?
I do, and I think they're starting to do studies on it. Again, I'm 30 years on this stuff. Something must have changed. I mean, I
Well,
don't think the DNA changed, and I
right,
think maybe I don't even know a brain talk,
right,
but
right.
something in there got a little bit more, and I'm sure the testosterone affected it on some. How can it not? How can it
So,
not?
so would you say there is a female brain and a male brain? Like
Yeah, I do
looking
think
back
that.
now. So, what
I
do you
do.
think the differences are?
Well, I think specifically, I couldn't say um, m- um, genetically, but I could say what happens is that the world, on some level, programs us as men and women, and I
Right.
think our brains get programmed to be a certain way. I think if boys and girls were raised as the same way of being, we
Mhm.
would have a different world. So I don't know if it's actually in the actual brain, but I'm
Right,
wondering if it has to do with society's
right.
stereotyping us and sort of imprinting that into us the minute we're born, right? We put a pink on girls, we put blue on boys, we
Mhm.
give boy toys, we give girl toys. I didn't grow up like that, right? I grew up with two sisters, but I always got boy toys, right? I always got to play boy, and I was a girl. So did that affect me? I do believe on some
Mhm.
level that might have affected how I approached the world. And again, I do think the testosterone gave me some form of confidence. And I don't know if it's the actual testosterone or that it changed my physical being so that the
Mhm.
world now sees me as male and my brain connects to that in a much happier way.
That's extremely interesting. How long do you think after your first initial shot to the point where you looked in a mirror and you said, "I am satisfied"? Like how long do you think passed?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think it took about 10 years, to be honest with
Uh,
you, where I started to feel in my body and I started to see a much bigger muscle mass and I started to see a change. I took me a lot. This beard, you see, it took me 30 years to grow. So, again, genetics are a big part of transition. So,
mhm.
your genetics are different than mine, your family background, where you come from, all of those things. I come from an Irish background, so we're not super hairy. And I lost my hair. I lost all my hair. Not all trans people, trans
Mhm.
males like me do that. So we all have different ways. My body was always very masculine, by the way. I never had a female. I didn't have that curvy ever. My mom used to always say things to me when I was a kid. I remember she's like, "Your body's so masculine." I always remember growing up with that, and people making comments that I didn't have a very female body. So that made my transition work even better.
Mhm. So that's interesting. So 10 years. Um that's wow, it blows my mind. So throughout those 10 years you were as you kept going, you kept being more and more satisfied basically, right?
Yes, that's right, because you start to see the little changes.
This is what I wanted to ask you. Why, if I could, why do
Yeah,
you think you never went through the bottom surgery? And is that important
great
for
question.
someone?
Great question. Again, this is my story, right? So I don't represent the trans
Mhm.
male community in any way, shape, or form. My desire to get the penis was always there because in my mind that makes you a man. Penis, right there, you're a man, right? So as we know, vagina women have and penis men have. That's
Mhm.
basic biology. That being said, back in the day, I didn't really have the opportunity to see many of these surgeries, and they weren't very new at the time. And all of the guys, I knew two guys that had it done as I
Mhm.
started moving and finding community. And both of them were very discouraged by them and they wish they'd never done it. So I thought to myself, well, does it work? No, it doesn't work.
Oh, it
So
doesn't work.
it
I never
doesn't
knew
work,
that.
dude. I'm like, what? What? So here I am. And I've always been a very sexual kind of person. Even when I was
Mhm.
a female, I was very sexual. I liked sex and
Mhm.
it felt good. I just sometimes was disconnected because I wanted my girlfriends to see me as a man and not as a woman. But I worked through it a lot of times. But that being said, I didn't see something that I would want to risk having that surgery. It was like a really long surgery. They used to take a tendon out of your forearm and then they would take meat out of your lower back and then they would mold it into this penis thing. And then back in the day, it was so crazy. Then they would leave a hole at the end of the tip of the penis and you would
Mhm.
have a stick that you would stick down it to have an erection. That's how
Wow,
you had an erection.
that
So
sounds
what?
painful, man.
It
Yeah,
sounds insane. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm like, I don't like any of that. And I also
Mhm.
didn't really like the way it looked. And I thought, gosh, people are not going to want to have sex with that.
Mhm.
And then one of the deciding factors for me was it was a high rate of not having an orgasm ever again. And I'm
Oh,
like, okay, why didn't you just tell me that first? Because because
that's a deal breaker, man. Like,
that's a
nah,
deal.
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm like, dude, why'd you waste all that time? Because we're not doing that.
Nah, yeah,
So yeah,
that's
that's
crazy.
why. But you know, a lot of guys do it today, and they say they're happy, and that's their choice. But for me, I'm the best. One of the best things I ever did was not do that surgery.
Mhm. And you so you never went back on it, like, you never thought about having it ever again. That's good.
No,
That's
no. Yeah,
that's
it
good.
is good, and I'm gonna tell you that I ended up creating a product that
Mhm,
was the very first, I guess you could call it a sex toy, but I call it a wellness product,
mhm,
that helps men like me, masturbate so that they can start to get into the body and feeling. I don't need to have that penis to be a man. I can move forward in my world, and it became the very first transgender toy ever in the world, and it just became
wow.
so huge and blew up. And it really, a lot of men would write, a lot of transgender men would write me and say, "Thank you, Buck. You really changed my life, and I feel more connected to my body than ever, and I don't have to have that surgery."
Wow, congratulations,
Thank
man.
you.
That's great. Yeah, I was gonna ask, so when you go through like all this whole process with testosterone, you're doing it for so many years. If I
Yeah.
could ask,
Mhm.
what are the feelings like in the vagina? Do you lose
Mhm.
the feelings? Do you like how does that work?
Great question as well. So what happens is our genitals grow. So remember when you're an embryo and you're like a little teeny thing before you
Mhm.
become a boy and a girl, the clitoris is actually a penis. So you can go either way. The penis can become it can become a penis or it can become a clitoris. So what
Mhm.
happens when you add testosterone into a female bodied person? You can see this with female bodybuilders as well.
Mhm.
Very similar to trans men. Is the clitoris grows very big, like a tiny little penis. It's actually shocking. And then it becomes sort of very sexualized on some level because I became a 16-year-old boy on some level, like literally, like I couldn't stop. And then I just realized, wow, this is really interesting part of our genitalia that we're not talking about and that we should be celebrating on some level. And why do you have to have that penis surgery when you can do other things with that? So yeah, I became highly sexually. I was already very open sexually, but it
Mhm.
just became a space where I was like pretty much horny all the time. And why I thought about creating that product, because I know a lot of guys don't want to touch themselves, right? So this even enables you not to touch. It just slides over the clitoris and you just
Mhm.
do this jerking motion, right? Just like a
Wow,
man. So
wow.
it connects to your brain. And also because a lot of guys like me don't want to touch their genitals,
Mhm.
which makes sense, right? And this enables you to sort of touch it without touching it. And it just becomes a very sensitive space and it grows and it becomes crazy looking. And it's not a vagina anymore. It's something
So
else.
wait, that's so freaking interesting. I'm
Yeah.
sorry again for
No.
interrupting you. So because you're physically a man, but you still have a vagina, you're saying you have a tough time with touching your vagina? Is that it?
Totally, totally. I had a hard time because it feels female to me, right? I know a vagina is female. That's
Oh,
the bottom line. I don't care what anybody says.
that
It's still
blew my
female.
mind, man. Oh
Yeah.
my
So I'm
goodness.
like, ew, I don't want to touch it. Like, ah.
Yeah.
And so I would figure out ways to touch it. I would create toys back in the day. I would take other sex toys and cut them up. And a lot of us
Mhm.
did that because we didn't have anything for ourselves. Remember what I said earlier? When you don't see yourself represented, you think you're sort of the only
Uh,
one. So when I created the product and it went to all the shops all over the world,
uh,
trans men started feeling like, oh my God, we have our own product. And I can actually sort of experiment with myself and see how
that's
I feel.
amazing, man. So how would someone get through that? Do you have an advice for someone? Like, let's say they don't get the toy, which
Yeah.
I would suggest for someone to get the toy, I guess,
Thank you.
because it's a good product, right? But if someone doesn't have the toy, like, how do you get through
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah, it's a mental space, 100%. You have to push through it and you have to know that it's not female anymore. It is now part of your different body. That's why it's very important that we
Uh,
talk about our different bodies. I'm not
okay.
you and you're not, and I'll never be you. So does that mean I have to struggle for the rest? No, it does not mean that.
Hell
And
no, yeah.
sex is so important. I believe
Mhm.
it is really one of the ways I've connected to myself and become much more confident because I have just nothing to hide from anybody at this point. And so by connecting, you've got to push through it. And it's sort of like therapy on some level. That's why I really encourage masturbation with people who are going through transition and try to push through that really sort of dysphoric feeling around your genitals.
we don't have too much time. I don't want to keep you for too long. I did hear. I think on just well, we do know this about you. You were in the pornography
Yeah,
industry
yeah,
too.
I
Yeah.
was.
So I'm sorry for interrupting you. How were you in the pornography industry as a man, or like how does that work? Just
Right.
real
Great
quick. Yeah,
question. I
yeah.
love your questions.
It's interesting as hell, man. Like really.
No, thank you. So, yeah, I was the first trans male man in mainstream porn, and I started that in 2001. I didn't
Mhm,
see a. I love porn. I mean, porn is a very weird space, and not everybody likes it. It's okay, but
mhm,
I think porn is sometimes a very good thing. Of course, there's a dark side of that industry. I was in it for 20 years. It's some of it's nasty and gross, like a lot of industries.
mhm,
But that being said, there's a great side of the industry, and so when I was the first trans male, and I put myself into the arena, everybody hated me. Not the trans community hated me, the porn industry hated me, the world were like, what a weirdo. And so I just saw a means and a way to sort of make $1 million. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. This is my body. And I'm going to be, Buck Angel, a man with a vagina, and
mhm,
just freak out the world. But that was a very powerful space for me to be in, because by creating that space, I brought visibility to guys like me
other
sexually.
people. Yeah.
And I showed
Uh,
those guys that you can have a vagina and still be masculine. And so I just started winning awards, and I was all of a sudden the whole porn industry was like, wow, you're awesome. And I was winning just everything. And then I got bored. I'll be honest with you, I got bored. There's only so many movies you can make. And people started asking me to, speak around the world. And that's when also my sex toys started to sort of
mhm,
come into play. And so I parlayed from creating porn, which isn't for everybody, and I don't expect anybody to acknowledge that in any way, shape, or form. It's just my space, and I'll never speak badly of it. I think it was a great
mhm,
part of my journey. But that being said, it put me into the sort of more product space, and which also helps a lot of people. So a lot of people will say, that he's just a washed up porn star. I'm like, you can think of me as you like, but my pornography changed the world on some level. It
mhm.
brought people to see a different way of being and a different lifestyle, and that, sex is a positive, good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
And it gave other people confidence, man. Like,
That's right.
because all of a sudden they're not like you felt when you were a teenager that I'm the only one. But
That's
my
right.
question was like, you were having an
Oh,
intercourse with a girl, like that.
so no, it's a great. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah, I skipped
yeah.
over that. So what happened when I started? I'm like, who's my market? Who's my customer base? No one's ever done this before. So
Mhm,
I made 3 movies. I made one with all men, which was very difficult because I couldn't even find people to act with me. So, dude, I lived in New Orleans at the time, and I
mhm.
remember picking up this young guy on the street. I think he was homeless, and bringing him home with me, paying him some couple $100, cutting his fingernails, making him get in the shower,
Oh,
and
shit.
I did a scene with him, and I made a movie like that, and then I made a movie with all girls, and then I
Mhm,
made a movie with men and women, right? And so one bisexual, one sort of woman, gay, you could call it lesbian if you want, and then a gay male movie.
mhm.
The gay men movie just blew up, and my
Wow.
customer base became gay men, which is actually shocking. I never in a million years would have thought that.
Wow.
And so that's sort of how I figured out my target market. And as a sort of businessman, that's what you need to do, and that's how you need to. So gay men became my target market, and they're the ones who really, the reason I succeeded in my pornography was because of them. They really sort of helped me get to that next level.
Now that I think of it, it must be a dream come true for a gay dude, like to find another dude with a vagina, man.
Totally, dude.
Yeah, man. That
Totally.
now that I think about it, that's crazy.
So
Um,
my mantra at the time was two holes are better than one.
yeah, right. That's crazy. Now that I think about it, man. Yeah, I don't want to keep you for longer.
Oh,
Thank you
thank you.
thank you so much for doing this. What I wanted to ask are a couple more. Everything you said is so important. What do we as a society, what do we get wrong about the transsexual and the transgender world? What are we
Mm,
not seeing
mm,
that maybe you could relate
thank
to us?
Thank you. I appreciate that question a lot, because I'm struggling a lot today as an elder in the community and seeing people possibly taking this route who should never be taking this route. So I distinguish the difference between a transsexual person of myself who has a medical condition called gender dysphoria, who went to a long therapy session and really realized this was the only way for me as an adult. Okay. Remember that as an adult, it's very important people understand this part of the story.
Mhm,
And so that's a sexual, somebody who has a medical eyes, wants to look like a man, wants to walk the world as a man or a woman, really makes an effort to do it, isn't identifying. I don't identify as trans, I identify as a man. My trans is my medical condition.
Mhm.
Now we have transgender today, which is a newer space, which is an umbrella term for any and every gender variant type of person who can also self ID and do not consider it a medical condition. So
Mhm.
transgender people identify as trans. Transsexual people identify as male and female. So it's a totally different space. And today, I would believe most people of the younger generation identify as trans without having a diagnosis, without understanding the long term effects. We are transitioning young kids as young as 10 years old. And I don't believe that's possible. And I do not believe that any child should ever be in this space. I think we
Okay.
should be working to get them out of
Mhm.
dysphoria. And what I see today is we're bringing them into dysphoria. And that disturbs
Mhm.
me, as this is not an easy road to take. And only an adult can take this road, because you understand you've got to live a little life before you take this. How can a 10-year-old know that they're a boy and a girl and they haven't even gone through puberty? It's
Exactly.
absurd. So I'm knocking heads with that sort of activism over there, because I
Mhm.
believe they're sort of an ideological space. I do not, and I don't believe that they're being open to the world about it. As you see, I'm very open
Mhm.
about myself and my journey, and I believe they're on some level manipulating what it is, and it's an ideological space, sort of more like a religious space than it is a medical space.
Mhm. So you can agree that we're seeing children being put on puberty blockers. That is not that's not right, right? Like
No, no,
yeah,
no.
what do you have to what do you have to say to those parents that are are
It's
going
disturbing.
through that struggle? Like
Yeah.
what would be the advice you could give them?
Number one, I'll tell you this. Anytime any doctor tells you if you don't do this, your child will off themselves, they're lying to you. Okay. So no doctor should ever be saying that, because that's not true. We don't have any of those kids. Where are they? They've never been here and they never will be here, because that's not true. Number one, so I believe parents, as a parent myself, are being manipulated into thinking if they don't do this, they're bad parents. Here in California, where I live, they passed a law that said if you don't transition your child, they will snatch your child away from you. That should have everybody up in arms. Are you kidding me? What? Your child is struggling. Maybe they're autistic, which we have a high rate of autistic kids are now trans. That's also BS. I can also show you that the whole rest of the world has stopped doing it. Everywhere. We're the only place besides Canada that is doing this to children. Every other country who have been doing it 30 more years have literally figured out it doesn't work. These kids will eventually grow out of it.
Mm,
Many of them are gay kids. They're not actually trans. So what I say to parents out there is get second and third opinions. Do not listen to the first doctor. Would you do that if you had cancer? Don't you
no.
usually go and have right second and third opinions? I feel like parents are being manipulated. And so I'm really trying to help these parents navigate this space, and let your kid dress like a boy or a girl. Who
Mm,
cares? Right? Let them play, be Tommy. Who cares? Get them trucks, get them whatever.
exactly.
But to give them medication that is actually irreversible, to me, is child abuse. It is 100% child abuse, because that child is not having a consensual. You're doing that you are speaking over the child. How do you actually
Mhm.
know that this child will be okay with that as they grow older? And what happens when they change their mind and you've now just destroyed their bodies?
Wow. That's listen, so we have about 4 minutes left. And again,
Thank you.
I can thank you like over and over and over again. Um what would you and again, your journey is so incredible. I really appreciate you. And you do look incredible, man. I gotta say, I gotta sound like Trump right now, man. Incredible, incredible, man.
Right on.
No,
Thank you.
you really do. You know, you're a role model to so many people.
Uh,
What would you like to what is the message that you could leave all of us with, and especially people on the other side of the fence that
yeah.
are turning their back and pointing fingers and saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, no, no, yuck, yuck, I don't want to talk about it." Like, what would you
Yeah.
say to people like that?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I talk a lot to those people because, like I said earlier, I'm a bridge builder, and I understand why. I understand why, because I worked many years to create a bridge with these people, and I did. They didn't hate me before. I'm telling you, the super hardcore right, what people call right wing conservative, all of that. They never acted this way to us before, because we were never doing what we're doing. So I'm going to tell the community, you got to start taking some responsibility for the stuff
Mm,
you're putting out there. And when you start putting lies and and doing stuff to children. I come from this community for 40 years. I've been in the LGBT community. We never, ever mess with children because that's the number one thing you do not do. You do not mess with innocence.
Thank
And
you.
now the community has brought children. I remember being gay when they tried to bring kids in with, the crazy guys, and it was called NAMBLA, National Association of Man Boy Love. And we were like, no, because
Wow.
we knew. So to the people out there who are hating on us, I really wish you would see me, because there's a lot more of me out there. They just don't want to step up to the plate because they're just living their lives as men and women, and they probably surround you every day and you don't even know that they're there. That's transsexualism. And those are the people that need to survive this horrible space of gender dysphoria. It exists. It's not going away. We will always be here. But what I'm going to say is to the transgender ideologists and activists out there, you better knock it off, because if you
Mhm.
don't, if you do not knock it off, all of our rights, not this, your rights, all of our rights will be taken away. So we got to build a bridge, and we got to be honest. The more honest you are in your life, whatever that means to you, you don't have to lie about anything to the world. But why are they lying? That's the one question I have. Why
Yeah.
is the transgender community lying?
Yeah.
That's it.
There's something much bigger involved. And this is exactly why, I appreciate you so much. And talk about bridge builder. You went on Jesse Lee Peterson. You can't,
Dude.
there's no bigger bridge to build.
Oh my God, dude. That was such an insane.
I
But
don't
I'm
know.
good.
I don't know how you did that, man. I was like, whoo, man.
Yeah, he was throwing hardballs at me, dude. And I'm just like, I've really learned, to just sit with it for a minute and not let them, because they're trying to take you out. I know what's
Yeah.
happening. They try to rock the boat, right? So you're like,
He wanted
and
to
I'm
have
like,
you run away, man.
that's right. I'm
He
like,
wanted that,
okay,
yeah.
I'll play that game with you, dude. Like, I'm not gonna agree with you, but
And you were
we
so
walked away.
nice too. You were like so freaking, and he was getting pissed. He's like, "Yo, why am I
Yes.
not getting under his skin, man?"
Nope, won't get under because here's the deal. We walked away as friends. He
Yeah,
respects me. At the
yeah,
end of the show, like after we got off the air, he was just like, "You're awesome, Buck." And I'm like, "Right on, dude." I was on Howard Stern a million years ago, right? Before any
yeah,
of this stuff. And people were like, "I can't believe you went on Howard Stern." But I'm like,
mhm,
"Why? Why
yeah.
wouldn't I?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't want people to see you, and you've got to go to the haters. You've got to actually have conversation
Mm,
with haters, because you can pretty much walk away if you're solid in your beliefs and you don't push your own beliefs on other people. And like I said, I don't care if you accept me or not. It's not going to change my life. I do not. I don't need you to accept me. I don't need validation from you. I need my own validation.
Buck Angel, we hit the hour mark.
Thank you.
You are incredible. You are amazing. I cannot thank you enough for doing this. Maybe one day we could, I'm the kind of person I could pick your brain on and on and on and on.
Right
Like
on.
I
Right
could
on.
keep going, man. So maybe one day we
Yeah.
could do it again. Maybe I can do something for you. I would
Yeah. Come on
love
my channel.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to call you my friend. And I'm originally from. I was born and raised in the Soviet Union in Ukraine, and my journey also has been long and crazy.
Oh,
And
wow. You're
and one
Ukrainian?
yeah,
Oh, my
and
my my son's father is Ukrainian. So
wow,
we're around a huge Ukrainian community here in
cool,
Los
cool,
Angeles.
cool.
That's so interesting. I
Yeah,
didn't Wow, that's
yeah. You see,
awesome.
it's always divine intervention. Everything happens for a reason, man.
Totally,
And
dude.
one thing that I always say is, let's strip away all these. Oh, he's a cop. Oh, he's a vegan. Oh, he's a meat eater, and let's fight. Like at the end of the day, we are human beings, man.
Right
We
on, my
all want
friend.
the same thing. We
That's
want to
right.
be happy. We want someone to love. We want someone to
That's
love
right.
us. Like, it's that simple, bro. Like, I've been all around the world. Trust me, man. No, I speak 5 languages. In all languages, love is love, man. You know what I mean? So
No, they don't want us to, though. You know that. They're trying to
exactly.
keep us separate. So that's why when me and you meet, we just blow the whole thing out the water. We're like, nope,
Yeah,
sorry. Me and you are going to be buddies. I don't care what
yeah,
anybody says.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
true.
So, Buck Angel, you are a true hero. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
friend.
so much, and
Thank you.
let's stay in touch. Maybe we could
Let's do it.
do it again, man. Thank
Let's
you,
do it. Thank you, friend. I'll
thank
see
you.
you.
Have a good one.
Yeah,
Yep.
you too.